record on your side as well,
Okay, I'm
or else I
recording
need
to the
to.
cloud. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, right on. Who wants to do the intro?
You go.
Do it, Dan. You want to do our intro?
That'd be
That'd be a
unusual.
first.
You said me. I'm doing it.
Go.
Okay. I'll do the 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, whatever. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Real Wealth Solutions podcast. I am one of your hosts, Greg Scully. Joining me is the other third of Real Wealth Solutions, Darren Light, and joining us as our guest, Mr. Dan Fradenburgh. I've never actually tried to say your last name, so hopefully that was reasonably close.
It's all good. I do throw people off with my series of videos, having it pronounced like 5 different ways. But I was always taught Fradenburgh, and I only found out the proper Dutch pronunciation when I turned 40, which was Fradenburgh. So
Fradenburgh.
yeah, so
You have to
that's a
add a
doozy.
little. You got to throw the back of the tongue up to the back of the roof of the mouth. Okay.
Right,
Right on.
yeah.
Dan's guy kind of met on LinkedIn, started hanging out together virtually. He hosts a full timers only. I don't know if it's necessarily full timers only, but a weekly virtual meeting on LinkedIn. That's kind of how we got together. I'll read a little bit of your bio, then you can fill in some gaps. He's the ex-chief technology officer for a residential real estate investment firm with 9 figures under management. I had to figure out how much 9 figures was. It's hard to envision in my head, but it's more than we got currently. Currently a commercial real estate investor focusing on multifamily, self-storage, and temporary structure tenancy listing. First of all, can you define what temporary structure tenancy leasing is? I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah. It's a much nicer word for self-storage, because if
Okay.
you just say self-storage, it's just a one step removed from like mobile home parks, things like that, which is something that if the deal makes a lot of sense and it's not like an eyesore in the portfolio, then it's much more stable money in some ways than it is in others. But that's basically what that's all about. I wanted to find a nice way that makes people feel warm and fuzzy about manufactured communities, such as a mobile home park. But more, I have to be agnostic of the property types to some degree, just because I live on the internet. So since everything's remote based, it's if it's a good deal and it makes a lot of sense, then that's something that we're willing to do.
Yeah, and you can see from his graphic in one corner, depending upon how you're looking at this thing. He's got funnel fixing. Most of your history, correct me if I'm wrong, is on the is it strictly email marketing side of it, or virtual marketing? I don't know. You will know the right term better than I do, and that's kind of what we're interested in talking to Dan about today. Is as real estate investors, to some extent, we need some inflow of uh, either deal flow, uh,
Or you have to make
lenders,
appointments. Yep,
yeah,
yeah.
or anything. So, there's some inbound and outbound marketing that we all need to accomplish. Some of it has to be within the framework of SEC regulations. I don't think we need to dip into that too much because none of us are lawyers, but we can kind of throw in some opinion and maybe leave it at that. But yeah, we're going to talk a bit about how we can do a little bit better job marketing, maybe keep it down to a few key points
Mhm.
to focus on. And yeah, please fill out the rest of your bio. I know there's much more to it than what I mentioned.
Sure. You mentioned the mass emailing, and I do also create integrations so that you can do the automated texting, the text messaging as well. But I started off in my technical journey with funnelfixing.com. I started that off by working for web.com, and what they offer, many people are familiar with PayPal, where PayPal will actually collect the cash for you. Whereas web.com's platform, it enables you to take those transactions, including putting into your PayPal, but it allows you to market to your customers far more effectively than you would without what's called a shopping cart software. So some people will try and make do with just their Gmail or with an Excel sheet, however they want to reach out to their existing customers, their existing database, to let them know, hey, we're having a special on whatever you're promoting at that particular moment. If you don't frequently remind your contacts, it's like, hey, we exist, and hey, here's something that you can do with us, then they're going to forget about you. And so as a multifamily real estate investor, one of the biggest things that you probably want to do is you want to make sure that you're on the tip of everybody's tongue. You don't want anybody wondering, it's like, are they still in business? I haven't heard them from them in a while. And so even if you don't have much to say, you still have to have something to keep you on people's radar. And I think that's the most important aspect of scaling a real estate business right now that is being missed by a lot of people. They want to build up to $1 billion portfolio, but if you're not doing constant outreach to the right people, then that's not really going to happen. And you can't do that anywhere near as effectively as somebody who has full access to appropriate technology. So that's what I help with, is make sure that the appropriate technology, they both have it and they're using it to build their businesses.
And that does come in two different forms, like inbound marketing, outbound marketing kind of is part of that. And if, the consistency and outreach is just a little note that I just wrote, is that can be done numerous ways. This podcast is one way that we're trying to do it, being active on social media, email newsletters, free webinar. I mean, there's 6, 7, 8 things that you could do to accomplish that. Are there a few that you would steer people towards if they're just getting started, or even specifically for our niche of real estate investing, that you think might give more return on effort than others?
Sure. And that's a balance that everybody in this industry is trying to find. It's like, should we spend more money on ads? Should we spend more effort on outreach where, somebody's actually bothering to contact people directly and say, hey, how is your business going right now? It's a tough one to find that balance. But the even more difficult one in our community of commercial real estate investors, it's that people have different amounts of startup funding, and that really is the crux, as far as what I've seen, of what's going to make it more likely that you'll succeed, and what is it that if you lack it, you're far more likely to fail. And so money is the biggest one. And of course, the less money you have, the more hustle you're going to have to do. But really, the first thing I'd want to emphasize to people is you are already at an enormous disadvantage if you're underfunded. And when I say underfunded, I'm talking, like low 5 figures. I think that's plenty to get going and really get a reputation and make things work. But some people are trying to do it with far less than that, like like with 4 figures or something like that. And unless you've got Energizer Bunny energy, you're really good at taking rejection, things like that. Unless you have those qualities, then you're really fighting an uphill battle. So if somebody has no money and they have a bit of time, LinkedIn is definitely one of the places where you will get traction for your free effort. But in general, these different platforms like YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, they know that there are all sorts of people who have no problem spending money on ads. And so they really have taken away a lot of our ability to organically get a much bigger audience. So organically means without paying for ads. You're using your hustle. So LinkedIn is a place that I'd start with, but I think the real piece of advice that's most valuable to people is I'd rather one of my clients picks, like one or two platforms and does a decent job of those instead of trying to do 8 platforms badly. So the real idea is you want to get, the balance between quality and quantity is one of the toughest questions that somebody can run into. But I guess the only other quick advice while I'm at it would be I'd focus on quantity in most cases over quality, just because your face in front of them seems to be the most important feature in the long term. Real estate investors have to be thinking long term to the tune of 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and let their online reputation snowball. As opposed to in other industries, it's like, okay, well, you do it for a little while and then you can disappear off the scene because you're so well entrenched into the community that you don't need to find anybody new. That if you're not ambitious, that might happen, but it's not really that likely.
Yeah, maybe you could talk about your YouTube video experiment,
Sure.
because I think that will frame out I think there is some misconceptions about organic reach, and I
Mhm.
think you did a pretty good job of proving how difficult it is to actually get eyes on your stuff without paying or just constantly pushing it somehow.
Right.
Which takes an incredible amount of time away from actually trying to acquire real estate.
Yeah, right, exactly. And Greg, you're very similar personality wise to me, which is that I am perfectly content to not be in anybody's face at all and be quiet. That is totally cool with me. I don't need to be in front of everybody. However, it pays better if your face is in front of a bunch of people. So because I'd already worked for companies where like I saw my old boss Josh. He went through about $150,000 in advertising, and he blew through that within like a month and a half. I'm a little bit iffy because it was a few years ago on the exact time frame, but it was short, right? And it's a lot of money. And so when I saw some different coaches, which in general, when it comes to online coaches, I'm extremely skeptical. And I think that's because, coming from a tech side, these gurus, they end up having to find a tech to build whatever it is they imagine, especially once they're established, right? When they're first starting, maybe they can get a simple, like ClickFunnels account or something like that, and then they can build their own stuff and, at least get started. But once it comes to really automating and squeezing out every last percent you can from the funnel, you have to get a developer who actually understands the technology and can change it however they choose. And that's basically what I did. So I have a lot of skepticism whenever I see a guru saying, "Oh, I know the whole system," and it's like, okay, well, you don't look like a programmer, and that's basically what's going through my head most of the time when I see that. So I really was pretty convinced that either these people who are spending 6 figures on ads, either they're super duper stupid, or the people who aren't spending money are kind of deluded. And so what I ended up doing is I was saying, look, well, how do I find out the answer? And that's not like just asking that question. That's not enough of a reason to do what I ended up doing. More specifically, I thought that most coaches were basically being predatory. It's an extractive economy where like new people come in who don't know any better. The coaches promise the moon, and they say, here, just do this and then you'll be completely rich and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, you know what, I don't buy it. And I also knew that because my clients through funnelfixing.com, because that's what I created as an agency coming straight out of web.com, that agency as a whole, I kept on building it and I knew that I wanted to build its reputation. But the problem was all of my clients were 7-figure online businesses. So one hole in my resume was, if anybody asked me, okay, but what if you're starting from zero? Like if you have no list, you have no leads, anything like that, do you have the knowledge to make that work? And for me, it felt too much like theory for me. So I figured it's like, well, if I need to be promoted, I might as well do it myself. I was involved in a couple different commercial real estate companies when I first started, but I figured, well, everybody wants to put out this level of content, but I can't turn around with a straight face with somebody and saying, yes, we need to put out one video per day for 366 days in a row on 366 different topics. Like if somebody turns around and says, I want to pay you to do this, and I want this to actually, I want to execute it and I want it to work. If somebody said that, I'd have to be really, really sure that it was actually going to work before I go along with it. Because I'd probably say it's like, shouldn't you be buying ads with all this money instead? So I like to think of what I did as the mother of all organic experiments, which is, as I said, 366 videos released to YouTube every morning for 366 days in a row, each one on a different topic. And because I can program, I know that that would be a way to, get through firewalls. If they have humans actually watching the videos, I'd bore them to tears and it'd get a pass. But part of it was, once I started putting out so many videos, I was going like, okay, so what exactly can you slip by without getting flagged or anything like that? And so that part was a little bit to entertain me. But basically, most people who are trying to open up an online business, or if they're realizing that online part needs to be a component of what they do, then the question is, how much do I spend on ads? How much do I spend on people who will do the hustle for me? And that's the answer that I was trying to get by putting out all those videos that quickly. And the answers were pretty surprising as a whole, in the sense that the psychological impact of talking to somebody with 400 videos on their YouTube channel, and like same with their Facebook page, all those different things. People react a different way to somebody who has that collection from somebody who doesn't. But as far as commercial success from just doing the field of dreams approach of, if you build it, they will come. That's as I said, I knew that, these guys who were spending 6 figures on ads, they're not complete morons. So I figured there had to be something up, and sure enough, there is. We're all getting squeezed by Facebook and Google and all these different advertisers without any doubt.
I have a question, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you identified basically a hole that existed for people that were trying to get started. And for your own business sake, you realize, oh, not every client I have is going to be a 7-figure client. I've got to figure out a way to cater to these people, and this experiment and others that we probably don't know about allowed you did your own digging, I guess, if you will, came to this conclusion of how to help those people moving forward. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is, because because I wanted to do organic. And so what I did is I definitely spent money on it, but I just didn't spend money on ads. That's the real crux of what my experiment was. And part of that was knowing, where's the cutoff. If somebody says no, I have no problem paying other affiliates. I have no problem paying celebrities. Like I've got a bunch of celebrities, mispronouncing my name or trolling me, chewing me out and all that kind of stuff. So it's very clear that I spent money on the project, but I just didn't spend it on ads. And I was curious, like, okay, well, what will happen if you do that? I didn't want to give anybody an excuse to say that in the project I deliberately sabotaged the project. I think even if you just check through the body of work, you'll find out that yes, there was definite real concerted effort to make sure that the quality wasn't hijacking the likelihood of success for the project as a whole. And that's what I needed to do. I needed to be able to tell these different businesses with a straight face that this is the right approach for your business. Because I just can't stand people who rob Peter to pay Paul.
Mhm.
And because digitally all these years I've been paid for actually helping people, so I just needed another way to explain to people why you shouldn't want to do this by yourself, because it's just so much work. You know, you're better, like you're going to be losing out if you're doing it yourself. So you might as well just pay me to do it, or at least, you know, somebody who understands it to a similar degree.
I like to think of what you just described as the go-giver mentality. Great book, by the way, if you've never read it. But adding value to someone, and not just taking their checkbook. You mentioned earlier about us as multifamily commercial real estate investors. You know, people need to know our face. We want them to know our face for the next 5, 10 plus years, whatever that looks like. You said something along those lines. What do you say to someone who says, hey, do I brand myself or do I brand my company? And what's been your experience with each of those, or what would be your answer, I guess?
Right. So there has to be a degree where you do both. Okay. You have to do a little bit for yourself and a lot for your business. Now, if you're a guy like me, you know, like that was one of my problems is when I was sitting down to write my book and just basically get this public persona, because like, you know, I was in digital security and so like, I was a complete recluse on Facebook. You know, I like my Facebook before I started releasing the one video per day, it probably had 6 photos of me / my family total, even though it was like a 10-year-old account. You know, so it like I don't feel the need to put my face out there online, and yet so I ended up doing all this sort of thing. So it all depends on what somebody is comfortable with doing. I know that being the spokesperson for your business is not always a good idea. I think in real estate, I think it's a much better idea than it is if you are selling a product. But, you know, basically there's a collection of traits that you really need to be if you're going to be what I call a useful spokesperson. And what I mean by useful is like, are you actually a net positive or a net negative? Just you being the face. I remember seeing in the book Guerrilla Marketing by J. Conrad Livingston. He put out the idea of like how many spokespeople for their own business can you think of where you would think of it in a positive light? Because there isn't many. Usually what happens is the marketing department or the ad guys, they're stroking the owner's ego and saying like, oh yeah, this is your business, this is your baby. And that'll show people, you know, it's true that, you know, maybe you'll be a little bit more genuine than a lot of other people. But in general, being the spokesperson for your own business, I think you should be really careful before making that decision. I've been studying the impact of fame / notoriety since I was a teenager, because I was teaching guitar from 16 at the local music store. So I was looking at all the rock stars and guys like Kurt Cobain, who he didn't seem to enjoy the fame as much as others. So I was like, well, I don't want to end up like that. And that's something that I think a lot of people need to think of. But of course, if you're just doing a very small, you know, a small business where only a few hundred people will ultimately know who you are in order for you to effectively do business, then that's perfectly fine. But that's what comes to mind on that topic of do it yourself versus pay other people to be the spokesperson and branding.
Well, you know, and because people end up doing business with the person ultimately, so that's part of the balance too. Is you can have, you know, your business page interacting as funnelfixing.com, and then you're also kind of doing things in parallel as just Dan.
Mhm.
And we're doing the same thing in ours. You know, some of the stuff we post some business stuff on our personal pages, and we want to be seen as one and the same to some extent.
Mhm.
So that we are recognizable as individuals outside of our business. But yeah, do we want to be Oprah? I mean, you can't separate Oprah from
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
That's
he's just
exactly right.
Oprah, you know.
Right, right.
Uh,
And with my book, that's one thing that was going through my mind, though, which I think anybody who's watching this, who's thinking about branding themselves, they should put a lot of thought into this one, which is I always focus on what separates somebody from their competitors. And so when I was getting to writing my book and realizing, hey, I have to get all this content online, I was going like, okay, so what's different about me? What can I do in a format of a show that's different from what other people can actually pull off? And one of the things that I found was usually somebody is I like to think of late night television, right? A lot of people say that Jimmy Fallon is being very successful because he always laughs at the guests' jokes, and everybody, feels like they're laughing along and all that kind of stuff. So there's a degree where you're watching Jimmy Fallon's show instead of another one because of Jimmy, but you're not really watching because of Jimmy. You're not really going, it's like, hey, this guy knows some stuff that I want to know. And every single time he finds some way to, throw something in where I'm like, I never thought of that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a different format. And that's kind of what I've been going for. And that's why I think it fits in well with me being the spokesperson for these different businesses. But long term, who knows? Dan Does Deals. That pretty much, dandoesdeals.com, that pretty much has to stay as being just me. But other than that, funnelfixing.com, it's down the road. I can have somebody else be the spokesperson.
well, that's the thing is, can you ever exit a business that has your name on it?
Right, exactly.
You know,
It's really tough. At
it
least.
makes it difficult to transition.
Mhm.
Potentially, at least, or maybe in some people's minds. Back to the YouTube series you did is, I mean, what are some of the takeaways from that? Organic reach has limited power. It
Mhm.
seems like unless you're an extremely early adopter in a new platform, like if you got on TikTok 2.5 years ago and started pushing real estate and you slugged through it, your organic probably did pay off, but that
Mhm.
was more of a timing because there's plenty of platforms that you can go onto and just peter out and go away. I mean,
Right. Right.
um, but to be on an established platform like YouTube and necessarily expect to have a lot of reach without paying
Mhm.
is extremely difficult.
Right. Right. Exactly. Even
You
if you're
still get the
shocking.
benefit of the credibility, though, and I think
Mhm.
that's important. It's like when people do ultimately try and find you online, they're like, "Oh wow, look at this great content he's putting out." I'm not necessarily I mean, there's people I respect and I look at their content on YouTube, and they're not getting a ton of views,
Right. Right.
but I still like their stuff. I'm wondering if people are impacted by the amount of traffic as a perception of a worth of their content. I hope not.
Well, one of the biggest things is what we call in marketing vanity metrics, right? And so, everybody wants to see a gazillion views and a gazillion subscribes and a gazillion likes.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is because I work for, one of the forefront single family residential investment companies online, I got to see what was actually going on. And I never once saw Josh, the CEO of that company where I was CTO. I never once saw him just buying likes or buying views in the sense of where like the views did not come from qualified leads. I never saw him do that even one time, but I'm wholeheartedly convinced that it is a very regular thing to do. It's not that difficult just to find a company in like Pakistan or India and just say, it's like, okay, well, there's 1.4, or well, actually, I think it's like 1.3 billion, 1.2 billion Indians or something like that. It's not that hard to make, 100,000 legitimate accounts and just go through and go like on all of them. But I also wanted to know, it's like, well, what actually happens? Because I figured that if you don't play by the rules, I figure you are going to get slapped in one way or another. And I do know some people who are in the black hat SEO industry where they don't really care that, that what they're doing, it's not what you're really supposed to be doing. Like one thing I've heard they do in Black Hat is they'll flood the internet with their narrative, which is basically what I ended up doing with my videos, right? I have 366 videos, and on 366 topics, all of them are cerebral. And most of them are in a format of, I tried to go for controversial as well, just to see if I could sneak in any juice or get anything flagged, even though I was factually correct. And I wasn't using any of the common buzzwords at the time. I also knew that this was in the middle of the most contentious election in recent history.
And everybody's home and online.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I knew there were a lot of risks involved. It's like, well, what if somebody does notice that I racially profiled a judge and uploaded it to YouTube? You know, like there are all kinds of things like that are in the subject line. I deliberately pointed out what I was actually doing. I wasn't lying. I did racially profile the judge, but it didn't matter because I'm not a police officer pulling people over. I'm just a guy on the internet saying, I wonder where this guy's from. And then I said it and I'm like, okay, let's upload it, see if it gets flagged or shut down, because everybody's talking about cancel culture. You know, I wanted to know how much of the outrage was manufactured. And I believe it's a massive percent of the things that we see. It's like, you don't see it unless people are actually paying for you to see it. That's basically what I'm getting at. But yeah, it's the whole process as a whole is a really neat process. I also called it, after a little bit into the project, I called it uploading myself. Because if you think about it, who in your family, like, you know, you guys aren't exactly spring chickens. How many people can you think of in your life did you have 366 conversations with them? You know, like at least 366. Like, you know, like, even go ahead and include your parents or your grandparents or anything like that. Chances are you didn't hit 366 meaningful conversations. Sure, you talked about, like, you know, did you bring your lunch or your jacket or whatever, but basically it gives people a chance to know, to have more conversations with me than anybody else. So I went for a format of, okay, if you went to your uncle or your grandpa and, like, nobody will answer this question, but, you know, so you need an answer. So it's like, all right, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you without being a jerk. Basically, the reason why I mentioned that in an interview with you guys is that if you're going to upload yourself, if you're going to do a project that's anywhere near this massive, so like even if you're doing 30 or 60 videos or something like that, it has to check a lot of boxes before you'll go through with it. People are buying their views, people are buying their likes, people are buying their subscriptions. And so as a result, you know, if you're competing with that, you know, you're going to get about 6 months in and you're going to quit. You know, you're going to start buying your ads, or you're going to do something because you're going like, this business has to work. And I was in one of the extremely rare situations where I could actually afford to do the entire project without hitting the panic button a couple months in, because I'm not getting the organic results I want. I wanted to have those organic results to say, it's like, listen, I did not monkey with those results at all. Okay. I did not sit there and say, it's like, oh, well, it's too embarrassing to only have 400 subscribers, so I got to buy a bunch more subscribers. You know, I didn't do that, and I didn't do it deliberately. You know, even though I got Steve Gutenberg, you know, saying, like, stop calling me for Dan Fradenburgh. It doesn't even sound the same.
That's awesome.
So that's really depressing, Dan, that all of my effort is going for naught. How do I fix it? I mean, you know, what's the consolation here, or what? 'Cause, you know, to buy advertising is fine, and I'm trying to switch it in my head, is that you're not just shilling to the public. You're giving yourself a chance to reach those people that will identify with you faster.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in an exchange of value, which is basically all that capitalism is, you know, they're able to find you, you're able to find them, and you can transact somehow faster because you're not wasting an incredible amount of time just posting stuff and letting it sit there.
Right. Well, on YouTube anyway, letting stuff sit there is not as bad as it sounds, because they're what's called a search-based platform. Whereas I'm getting this from Peng Joon. He's a guy in Malaysia or Singapore, some fantastic marketer. But he was pointing out that YouTube is a search-based platform, whereas something like LinkedIn or Facebook, those are interruption-based. So the idea is people are just scrolling through to find something to check out or read. And so what you're doing as a marketer is trying to get them to stop and pay attention to your stuff. Okay. So that's a very specific purpose. Whereas with YouTube, people search for what they're going to watch. So you have to be keyword heavy so that people will find your stuff. Okay. So it's a very different platform. And so your approach and your understanding of what you need to be doing, it's very important to keep that in your mind. But what you were just describing was exactly what every marketer needs to do, which is you need to put yourselves in the shoes of the person you want to connect with, and then, basically play a probability game of what's the most likely way for me to, connect with that person. Like, what can I show them that will inspire that confidence in me, so that when a deal comes along, and I want to work with this person, or if you want to buy their building, then they go, okay, this person's not fly by night. This person is going to be there 5 years from now. Me personally, when I'm vetting people, I think I mentioned this before, I like to look for the ones that have that look in their eyes of tiredness, of I'm just sick of people playing all the little games, trying to squeak out their extra little bit, where if they just did it the hard way of not cutting corners, then everybody would be happy and they'd be much more successful. That's what I understand from my work experience, is that everybody gets along much better when you dispense with all the games and just like play people straight. And so that's what I try and convey in videos, and what I encourage other people to convey in their videos is just that deadness on the inside of your eyes that comes when you're middle-aged or older, of just like, please just don't make my life awful. I just want to do my job and, like effectively, get these people involved in our business and keep them happy. Can we just not be ridiculous and awful? Please.
Yeah, I mean, for us in real estate, I think one of the most important things is the list, is establishing a list, because YouTube can change their algorithm, Facebook, you don't own any of that stuff. So can we talk a little bit about maybe kind of growing the list and doing some inbound, maybe some basic funnel stuff?
Right. So
that when we do, hey, Dan sees me post something, he clicks something, goes to
like an opt-in form.
Yeah, an opt-in form
page,
or the landing page. Yeah, and then he's like, yeah, I want his free ebook. Boom, enter your email, goes to my list, drops into a funnel. Can we talk about that stuff a little bit?
Sure. So basically, people still like, email is alive and well. It's still definitely working, but it's not as well as it was, say, 10 years ago, because more and more of the email providers are stepping up efforts to stop spammers, and they have a very clear idea in their head on what it means to be a spammer. And one thing that's really interesting, because I've been talking directly with some of these SMTP guys, and the guys that are really, like all day, every day, they're just reading about what developments on email deliverability every single day. And they're in a position where what was established law on Friday, it can all go away on Monday. So basically, because of that, maybe it's because Google and Facebook's or whatever, like those different platforms, they believe that only the big companies of this world should have the ability to email. Like we were doing about 5 million emails a month, the proper way. So we were actually getting inbox, like, you know, the emails were arriving in the inbox, we were getting decent open rates and all that kind of stuff. But if you start from zero, there's a way that they dictate that you have to do it this way, or else, you know, they'll shut you down. So bot lists, that'll get you shut down, which would just be if you turn around to somebody who's in the industry and say, hey, you're in the industry, I'll give you this money if you give me a list of your customers, and then I'll just start blasting out emails to them, like as if the person said that it's perfectly fine when it's not. So when I was talking to these SMTP guys, the fun part was I was pointing out that Google and AOL, Hotmail, you know, Microsoft, all of them, what they're looking for is engagement. You know, people, they want to make sure that whoever gets the email, they actually want to receive the email. And it's funny, like, for example, if you're doing like a outreach to brokers, to real estate brokers, if you email a broker, say, hey, I'm looking for deals, you know, I feel sorry for your inbox, because it's going to get pummeled for the rest of your life. Okay, these are the most engaged people out there, these brokers. So from the actual principles of anti-spam, it should be perfectly fine approaching brokers, because they want to be contacted, but they'll still end up finding ways to stop you from mass marketing to them quickly. And the way they do that is by looking at the speed at which you're scaling. So if you were a legitimate startup, then you'd have, starting with no list, then, you know, how many people could you realistically pay for to get them to sign up and opt in? And so they basically, that's why they force you to stagger the number of people who you send to over the first period of time. So what is this, all this information useful for to real estate investors? Well, the most important part to take away from what I just said is it's a lot of work. It's a lot of nuance. It's extremely boring. And if you can't catch from all those adjectives, you don't want to do it. And I can be certain that you don't want to do it, because I've done it a few times and I hated it. I don't look forward to doing it again. But basically, those are the things that you have to be aware of if you're getting into email. So there are way more hurdles going into mass email and not getting shut down compared to, you know, Facebook and LinkedIn. But with Facebook, LinkedIn, all those, then you just have to watch your language a little bit more and everything will be fine.
So, I mean, is your advice to, from the outset, if you have the resources, have some spend? Because ultimately, you know, in this business, you know, we're not selling boxes of candy where we need to say, you know, sell 10 million of them to make any money. We need a modest list of people to transact with and perform well, and hopefully we can get a lot of referral business as a result. So, you know, is that a decent strategy to have in mind, is to do some spend, get some scale, get a reasonable list, of course, execute as a business person, and then develop the relationships for the referral business? Because it seems, you know, you want to get to that tipping point type thing, because it's a grind, you know, trying to get to where you can reliably do a you know, a raise in 48 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah, like, honestly, from what I've seen with raising capital and things like that, that's going to have more to do with your hustle than anything else. And, you know, I hate to be the bearer of bad news again and again. I feel like a lawyer or a CPA with all the bad news I've been telling people when it comes to these things. But with what you're describing, it's like once you got the list, well, then you're going to have to there's an extra part of vetting them all, because like a bunch of these people, they're going to waste your time on all sorts of stuff. It's like, you know, oh, you know, where do I get this download that was, you know, link, there was a link in what I just hit reply to, and I just didn't even notice it. And I'm going to bug you to find this, state the obvious, and you have to not be rude when you respond, like it's so basically like everything snowballs into something else that you need to do. So one thing about the outreach, it's all about data processing, which is the process of vetting and tagging people appropriately. So it's knowing, okay, so who are the people who, maybe they have a little bit of money to invest, who are the people who are just learning or whatever. And in any corporation, I think that mostly what you end up doing is Band-Aid solutions for whatever's going on. It's like, okay, well, this will last for the next like 4 months, and we don't have the bandwidth to do anything more than this little fix. So, so basically what's going to happen is if you do a bunch of advertising and you build the list, well, then you're going to have a problem on the customer service and vetting things, like making sure that they're all responded to. So you need a system in place for that. And then, you need a team for building your funnel for whatever it is you are making. And then there's the problem of if you keep on advertising the same landing page to the same people, if they're like, I've seen this before or something like that, and they don't go for it, well, unfortunately, that means you need to build a new page. So you need some new way of packaging it, or to make them think that they don't have it and they need it. And that's one of the fun things that I got to see as the admin for this this coaching company that's on the bigger side, is I got to see people buying the exact same ebook, the exact same PDF, like 2-3 times, when that makes absolutely no sense because it's a digital file. There's no point in making a collection, but that just tells us that people, they want to feel like they're moving. And this is directly for people who are marketing to real estate investors. People want to have that feeling like they've done something for their business today, so they don't feel like a lazy ass. and I think that's what they end up doing, is they sign up for stuff that they already did. It's like, okay, I'll read that later and then I'll ramp up my business and everything will be wonderful with rainbows and fluffy pillows and butterflies. But
honestly, you just described,
Yeah.
Greg may slap me for this, we're sort of in that mode currently and trying to get to that tipping point. We're in that Band-Aid.
Oh, yeah.
We're
Absolutely.
in that Band-Aid area where we've done enough and have enough experience, but yet there's all these little things system wise. And you just touched on a bunch of I'm like, oh God, we're there.
Right.
Right. And honestly, we've not spent. So number one, yes, we need to do that. But number two, we got to set up things to handle it with, and move on. And just talking about new business or building a business, we love talking about that stuff. We're like, we're not experts in anything. We're good at a lot of stuff, but we share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that's kind of getting off the sidetrack. I think that's one.
Well, it just sounds like another, it's systems. It's another thing that needs a system that you can attempt to kind of do it piecemeal, but you'll never optimize it.
Right.
And some of this stuff, I mean, we build some landing pages and funnels. We had an e-commerce store back in Alaska, so we dabbled in stuff to do Shopify and lead pages, and had some very limited success with that kind of stuff. And I just remember it was a ton of upfront work. And then you try and unleash it on the world, and then you have to just constantly analyze it, optimize it, change it, and then the whole automated email funnel trickle campaign is, we didn't even get into that, but that they're very useful, but there's a lot of front end work to those.
Right. Well, that's something I'm looking to cure as well. The biggest problem I have is, like Warren Buffett says, you should never go to a barber and ask if you need a haircut. Well,
Right.
The same goes with all this digital stuff, right? And I actually, I'm making a new brand of a subscription that I think solves that problem. I'm hosting it at a disinterestedthirdparty.com, but I need to put something on funnelfixing.com as a label for it. But the idea is it's a subscription where you get access to me, and I get rid of the conflict of interest that comes with working with any professional, which is specifically, like the developer wants to set you up with a $15,000 project when it might just be a lead page, a landing page would be enough, where it's like, $300, $500, depending on, how much work is involved. Right. And so that conflict of interest, it means that we can't even trust each other when we're having a decent conversation. So the way that I got around that with this subscription, it is essentially a consultation product, but the idea is if I'm not actually the one who's doing the work, then that I actually do have your best business interests in mind. So you don't end up, like it's basically like, like buying a Ferrari when a Kia will do. That's the thing that I want people to avoid. It's like, okay, if you've got this fantastic system, if you blew your entire budget on building the funnel, and you don't have enough money to actually promote it with ads, or, you're not like you're on some sort of time constraint where, like 6 months of, daily posting on LinkedIn, that's not really going to work. So basically that's something that I'm offering to people to make sure that I can give the right advice at the right time to the right person. Because most people are going to want to, the solution most people go to is they get a manager with, basically entry-level skills. And then, you end up buying like $100 course in Facebook ads, and then you buy $100 course in whatever else. And so you get somebody who probably isn't that motivated, definitely doesn't understand the actual industry that you're doing, right, that you're in, and what you're trying to achieve. And that makes it very difficult for them to make great, interesting content. Don't get me wrong. It's like in real estate in general, there's very little interesting content. It's mostly, let's check out the cap rates in this MSA. And it's just like, oh, well, that never heard that one before. Never could have.
Well, that's
true.
Are you done? I didn't mean that in a bad way, but I was just you were kind of leading into, something that maybe we could talk about is just copy in general, or, how to stay relevant or finding your voice. Because I remember on LinkedIn during the election, on both sides, there were people just completely identifying with one side or the other. And in my mind, I'm like, what the hell are they doing? They're just like completely alienating half of the potential customer base. But then I'm also just thinking, or is that a brilliant move because they have set up a filter and have created a way to create an identification with them, and have like just shrunk their potential pool by just like, I know these people are not going to identify with this. Fine, unfollow me. I don't care. But these other people might be like, yeah, they're on my side. I'm more interested in transacting with them because I think we have a moral values type of connection. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, like writing copy, finding your voice. How do I do this without just feeling like I'm shilling to the world a bunch of garbage?
Right. Well, I mentioned before with the 366 videos in 366 days, it had to check a lot of boxes for me to actually follow through it. And one of them was I knew that I wanted to become the best I've ever been on camera. I wanted to make sure that when I'm on camera and I'm speaking, I remember what I was going to say. I don't sit there and say, what was I talking about? I have that confidence, and that's the thing that I really wanted to be able to do. And that's also why I did it for something other than real estate. It's because I wanted to make sure I had it locked before I even really started pushing the thing that I thought would really change my level of wealth. So that's one of the other things that I can say about making a massive project like that. It helps you be able to say what it is you want to say when it's time to say it. And if that means you have to put out a bunch of content, like most people will have to put out a bunch of content that they don't really believe in. But the more important thing to understand, you were mentioning about being upfront about your politics on LinkedIn, and I'm quite convinced that a lot of the politics you see on Facebook, it can be automated bots by foreign actors or whatever. So like, I do think that, like if people don't even know that their account has been hacked, then you can automatically post on that person's Facebook and say, some drivel that the
Anything you
person,
want, yeah.
yeah, because most people never actually go to the little icon to look to see what they've posted. So it's the perfect crime, and I think there's part of that, but there are a lot of gurus out there that are saying don't be boring. And there's a lot of truth to that particular idea. But yeah, I'm definitely very sensitive to the idea of offending half the population and saying it's like, okay, well, we're never going to work with you. But of course, since in Figure It Out, one of the reasons why I was able to come up with that many topics is because I was talking about serious things like politics. And I know that, like in particular, I think the ones that tend to alienate people very frequently are the ones who are complaining about cancel culture as well. And I think that's part of it. At the same time, it's just they just are concerned that if they're not speaking with their political peers, then they're going to wind up canceled. I think that's part of what's going through people's heads. But then the other saying is never account to intention what can be explained off as ignorance or stupidity. Right. So it's like, sure, a lot of people, they just put it up there because they couldn't think of anything else. And, is there a problem with that? Well,
I mean, that's my thing is like, I don't have that much to say that I feel like is worth posting about. It's like,
it's all
I'm
been
more than
said
happy to
before.
post stuff about, stuff that's relative to our market that comes up and is newsworthy and, comment about that. But just coming up with things on a fairly regular basis that I can say in, 230 characters. I'm not on Twitter or anything, but even LinkedIn has some limitations. It's like,
Yeah.
Because you're a fan of quantity, unless I heard you wrong from earlier. That you need a certain amount of quantity just to rise up out of the stew a little bit.
Right. And when I say I prefer the quantity side, I see some people trying to do like 5 pieces a year, and that's nothing. People, they'll see something like the third time or whatever and just be like, yeah, so, and you'll just be sidelined as far as I'm concerned. So like as far as like I know that when we do a promo, we probably have about 8 videos created, but they wouldn't be content pieces. They'd be actual sales funnel. And so that gives you an idea of what kind of, so when I say 6 to 8 videos, that might be like a 2-week promo, like at the longest. Okay. But when it comes to regular content, if you're putting out one piece every couple weeks, that's good. But as far as inspiration goes, that's the other reason why I wanted to make myself available as a subscription to people, is because I don't have trouble finding more things to discuss that are unusual to discuss. And the tricks that I use is I just follow what I find interesting. There's got to be something that you find interesting about this industry. I'm also the host of a new show called, which is hosted at realestateisascam.com. And it's just because I like to look around and say, hey, look at these guys. They're terrible. They're doing awful things to people. And I find that, morally reprehensible. But it's a lot funnier if we just go through it and say, hey, this is what they're doing, and this is how you get around it. And do the whole thing with a smile on your face. So that's something we can definitely do. And I want to include interviews with contractors and whatnot and say, see that right there? It looks perfectly fine. But if you look a little bit closer, hey, is that a gap under those stairs? Hey, that's not even level. That like replacing that would probably be about this much money. That's going to hit your bottom line. Things like that. There's no shortage of unscrupulous figures in this industry, and the more I can do to keep us all on the straight and narrow, I think the better off we'll all be. Because
you need some content for that specifically. Greg and I can hook you up.
Excellent. Yeah, let's get lots of stuff out there. But that's the main
Talking
thing.
about the decks. My deck building ability.
No, not you. Not you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
That's
you
funny.
Give
really
yourself some
personal there
credit.
for a second.
I want to real quick, I want to go back to list and just outbound marketing. You made the comments, not verbatim, but somewhere along the lines of maybe despite what people think, email's not dead. Maybe 10 years ago, because of spam campaigns, now it seems like it's not as effective or something. You didn't say all that. That's kind of in my head. So I'll say this. I hear from people in our industry, hey, email's dead. And now texting is, we do business all the time now with texting. I actually pay for some lead generation stuff to find single families now for flips. And they are very successful with texting. The cold texting and the response rate is much higher than calling and or emailing. Just maybe speak to that, I guess, if you will, and maybe your experience where you see that going.
Sure. So if anybody's saying that email is dead, there are a few reasons why they do that. It's the biggest one would have to be marketing. Like I know that a friend of mine, he's a comedian, and he was given an example of ladies' night comedy where men just aren't even allowed into the building. That's a marketing stint. And saying that email is dead, that's revealing one of two things. Okay, either one, the person's just not selling something related to email, and they need to answer why they're not doing something related to email. The other one is that, which I think I've shown pretty accurately in this interview here. It's nuanced. It's not something you don't just flip a switch. And
I was going to say they're bad at it. That's why they think email is dead.
Well, yeah. I prefer to say it's nuanced, and of course, I think most people would say it's like, okay, well, if it's nuanced, then I'm going to be no good at it, and it's like, no, I thrive in nuance, because I'm going like, yeah, that's a little bit. Well, I wrote a book that's about attention to detail, so I'd hope so. But so because there are so many different factors, I remember when I first started working for oneshoppingcart.com, and I heard some clients complaining about the deliverability back then. I turned around to the director and I'm saying like, okay, so what's the story about email deliverability? It's like, I could tell you a book this big on email deliverability, and it still wouldn't be all of it. Okay. It's so multifaceted, because it's not like, how taxes are controlled by the IRS and that's it. It's email deliverability is controlled by Google and AOL and Verizon and Comcast and Microsoft. And, and like there's so many different companies that are controlling it, and they all have different IT teams. There are conferences and whatever where they'll get together and say, okay, well, we should change the rules so that, we shut people down if they do X or if they do Y, all that kind of stuff. So is email marketing dead? Definitely not. If you have the people, the IT to do mass emailing, it's still kicking ass. It's still making a ton of money. And, people are still all paying their shopping cart or their email service provider, like a Constant Contact, MailChimp, all those different guys, they're doing all the hard work that, used to be an entire IT team. But, like, are they the best? Well, no, it's if you do have, like a couple $100,000 per year to spend on an IT team, that's still definitely the best way to do it. Of course, you have to have the right.
We just go to the barber and ask for a haircut.
well, I'm not asking to sign on the dotted line, but the main thing I wanted to emphasize, though, is that as real estate investors, there's only one thing that we need to be focusing on, which is our direct competition. Like, can we compete against Citibank or Wells Fargo or whatever? It's like, of course not. But we can compete against the person who's similar sized. And how are we going to do that? It's by having a piece of the puzzle that the other guy doesn't have. And just making it work. So basically I'm saying is that, I'm even saying it flat out with my services. Are my services essential? Not really. But once you're making enough money, once your business is big enough, if you don't want that other guy who's a similar size to be eating your lunch, then you do need somebody like me. And that was one of the things I really wanted to achieve through my body of work. It's just being able to tell people, it's like, okay, can you do this? Like, can you afford to do this? And if the answer is no, it's like, I can't in good faith take your money, because you're not going to achieve anywhere near the results that you are hoping to. So come back and see me once you've got, more going on, sort of thing. And I don't want to be that guy, but somebody has to be that guy and work with the ones who have significant enough funding to really scale and grow.
Yeah. So you're a busy guy. You mentioned a book. You mentioned 3 or 4 different websites you got going on. We always like to touch a little bit on mindset. How do you keep all of these moving parts in check and still have time for family and playing guitar and hanging out? I mean, how do you manage your time? Are there any routines you've established that just like this is how I roll, and this is what's keep me centered?
Well, that's a lot of ground there, right? One of the biggest ones is, like I've been working from home for 10 years. So you mentioned, like hanging out. It's like, well, like, I also have young kids. I'm 40. So, my oldest, he'll be 8 this year. So it's still not at the point where, I can be going out and hanging out with friends regularly anyway. Of course, I also lived in Taiwan for 15 years and I moved back to Canada 4 years ago. And basically because of that, it's like, no, it's not, I know that I seem like the life of the party and all that kind of stuff, but not a whole lot of partying going on with some young kids. So right there, that helps. The other thing too is that I don't watch like fiction television at all. I preferred, I learned this from my best friend, was going to like the greatcoursesplus.com or masterclass, different things like that, where they've got these cerebral topics and you can watch them. But if you check out my YouTube channel for Figure It Out, and it's spelt funny, I can throw up a background in a minute if you want. But I interviewed the world's fastest reader twice and for Figure It Out, and we were talking about the different ways to absorb more information way faster. And so one thing I'll do is I'll always watch my videos at 2 times speed. And now, like, that's hard at first, but the nice thing about that is if you've got it on 2 times speed, you are already like focused and dedicated on that time. So unlike a normal video, if you're watching it at normal speed, maybe you won't tell your family members, hey, you can't be bugging me right now because I'm in the middle of something. But if you're watching at 2 times speed, then you absolutely can tell them to leave you alone. It's like, okay, this is a 15-minute video. I need 7.5 minutes. Come back in 8 minutes. That sort of thing, right? So you're really dedicating the time to what you're learning and, sucking it in way faster. So that's one of the biggest things I do. As far as how do I keep all the different moving pieces of my business, how do I keep them together without, losing it or keeping things moving forward? It really goes back to what I was saying about the daily videos, about checking a lot of boxes. I won't proceed to build a website or a business unless it checks several boxes. I think that there are multiple ways that it could work out very well. Like, one is, like, I find that like real estate investors, they really resonate with the idea of realestateisascam.com because they've been in a situation once or twice where it's like, this is nuts. I can't believe the person sleeps at night when they're pulling this kind of crap. And it's just funny and fun. So that's what I make sure I do. But of course, because of my background with digital marketing and all that kind of stuff, I can build a website in a day. But the problem is there has to be somebody who's decisive to decide what's it going to look like, what's it going to say. I happen to be that person who's decisive. So that's why it's like, okay, realestate'sascam.com. I threw together some videos and then I built the site in a day, and then I put it on my list of do not touch. You should have some things in your businesses where you have it on a list where it says like, okay, if you catch yourself spending any amount of time on this, You have to stop immediately. Okay. And one of the things on my list is realestateisascam.com. I should not touch it until I have, checked a few boxes on some other things. And that's not going to be there till, like next week or the week after, something like that. So to recap, I stick to things that are cerebral and not particularly fun or whatever, because I learned a while ago that if instead of doing the thing that is the most fun thing you can think of, if you could do something that's slightly less fun, but it's got way more, productivity or result, or, you actually learn something, then it's a better way to spend your time. And if it becomes a habit, then, the world's your oyster as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Nice.
A little very intentional living type.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Very original thought process too.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Seriously, thank
But
you.
I did forget about family, and family, it's not just my why, it's also my why not, as far as like why I don't do a whole bunch of things, is because I have to be available for my family. And that's very rarely a concern for me, just because I've been working from home for 10 years. So my kids have seen me every single day of their lives. And so that's the real reason why many of us are here, is for family. So
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
my answer too.
All right. Well, cool. Let's wrap it up. Dan, please tell our listeners, we'll put it in the show notes as well, but how can they get a hold of you? Where should they check you out? Maybe if there's something very specific to the discussion from today, where would you steer them for more information about these marketing topics?
Sure. So funnelfixing.com. I have some free marketing topics and articles that are available there for people. As far as real estate specifically, my podcast is dandoesdeals.com. I also have some stuff on there for the multifamily meetup that we discussed earlier. But LinkedIn is one of the best ways to connect with me in a business context, because then I know you're actually there for business. Whereas on Facebook, I have no idea why you're messaging me. Well, at least, it could be figure it out. It's probably funnel fixing, but there's no real guarantee. It might be just because you see what other real estate groups I'm in. And you're like, oh, you want to market to me? It's like, all right, well, you can go ahead. But just because I've been in charge of so many spam filters in my life, I ignore way more people than I think a lot of people do. And I have absolutely no problem with that. If I start to get a whiff of, this is a form letter, and it's like, you don't even know that you sent this to me. so that's usually what ends up happening. But I definitely, despite this, tough exterior that I'm putting on, I am more than happy to work with more people, and it'd be great to see more of you.
Yeah, and a plug for the meetup on LinkedIn. I join it when I can. Might be a little late today, but yeah, we have a good time. Just chit-chatting, authentic, kind of transparent, what's going on with the real estate conversation. So check it out if you got some time. But,
At 10:30 in the morning Eastern. So if you're
Tuesdays,
on Tuesdays, it's the best real estate in your schedule, at least, especially if you have a job. Basically, even if you have a full-time job, you're expected to be at your desk and productive at 10:30 in the morning Eastern, and sober. That's important too.
Mhm.
So I was going like, hey, let's go ahead and do that now. And of course, I don't notice a whole lot of troubles, lack of sobriety in the 7 p.m. calls at all. But I just like to do stuff tongue in cheek and pretend that we're all just like, this is all just a facade, and we're all actually just a complete mess on the inside. I like to pretend that because it's just more fun.
Yeah,
Facade.
definitely makes you feel better about yourself.
Makes you think
Yeah,
this is a
it's just,
facade.
hey, we're keeping it together. Yes.
All right, well, let's close it out. We're coming up on a time constraint. So, Darren, you want to take the extra? It's not the right word, but the outro, the ending.
Good try. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of the Real Wealth Solutions podcast. Thanks to our guest, Dan Fradenburgh. If you found this content valuable or helpful, we would appreciate you sharing it with anyone that you think might benefit from it. Until next time, everybody have a good day. Bye.
Thanks a lot. See y'all later.